So let us talk about the state-imposed friendship, because it seems to me that sometimes, the government should let people do what people do.
How very far right of you, Stelios.
without trying to constantly interfere to things that there are spontaneous emotions. And this, I think, is one of the major problems with statists, is that they constantly think that they can force people into do what people do regardless. And as they say, there are many nice sayings about the government. Some saying that, Ronald Reagan said that, the most terrifying thing is, the most terrifying 9 words is when you hear people saying, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And another saying is that, the government is perfect in giving solutions to problems that they create. But before we say more about this, you could visit the website, where for only £5 a month, you can gain access to all our premium content. And you can check videos like the latest symposium I did with Bo and Josh on the conceptual psyops of wokeness and the linguistic subversion behind it. The reception of it has been really good and warm, and I think it's a very interesting topic to discuss. I know we discuss it on a daily basis. Check out more if you want. Now, so I came back and I saw this from Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut. So what he says is that if we go to this link by him, it says news. Today I'm introducing a groundbreaking bill, the National Strategy for Social Connection Act. It creates a federal office to combat the growing epidemic of American loneliness, develops anti-loneliness strategies, and fosters best practices to promote social connections. Now, if we look at it, he says the Surgeon General recently declared an epidemic of loneliness. I'm focusing on epidemic because it has clear connotations to pandemic.
Yes.
And isolation. So we have an epidemic of loneliness and isolation in the United States, noting that social isolation and loneliness pose a significant risk to individual health and longevity, create economic cost for individuals and communities, and decrease community resilience, safety, and economic prosperity. The National Strategy for Social Connection Act is a simple roadmap to begin addressing the epidemic by naming the problem, developing solutions, educating the public about best practices, and improving data about the scope of this problem.
Are you trying to bring me out in a rash allergic to managerial language, Stelios? Because this is hell. First of all, the mask-off moment here is that it's not epidemic. It is epidemic, not pandemic. And the reason is it's epidemic to cities where people are packed into high-rises and stratified from their neighbors. You're not getting a loneliness epidemic in rural communities that are rearing each other's children and doing pod schooling and have faith and family. So that's an interesting thing. Also, the bureaucratizing of language here. Everything has to revolve around how can we maximize prosperity? How can we maximize efficiency? This is what Ivan Illich calls shadow work in his book Gender. It's that in the economic framework of, he would say capitalism, I'm increasingly thinking that myself, of everything in the economy is towards generating abundance and exponential wealth, then any time spent not at work is time spent recuperating maximally so that you can get back into work, so that then you're maximally rested to then go back to generating capital again. And that's how he's treating social engagement. He's treating it as it's only useful because the experts have validated it scientifically and rationally. And also, it's if you spend leisure time is only justified by it allowing you to rest up so you can go straight back to work earning again. And this is the worst heuristic in the world. I want to throttle him, metaphorically.
I mean, they would say that, what's your purpose in life? Just sitting there? Go out and work and be productive.
Sure, but that's not the only thing either. And productive towards what? You should be subsisting towards your family, not giving it up to the great Brahman of money. You know?
I know. I'm trying to poke you. You know, I have a reputation in this office about how I treat my coworkers.
You're the trickster.
Yeah. Okay, so this bill would establish an office within the executive office of the president to combat loneliness and strengthen communities. Create an office of social connection policy to advise the president on loneliness and isolation and how these issues relate to the economy, public health, national security, the environment, and civic and community engagement. Form an advisory board within the office to convene stakeholders and work, well, whatever. Okay, but the important thing is that it requires a national strategy on social connection.
And also, he's putting it in the office of the president. So I don't want to get closer to Joe Biden. Nobody wants to. He's going to smell my hair. I'm not going to befriend an 80-year-old man who falls over sandbags with dementia. Thank you very much.
Also, improve public education and awareness on social connection.
Great. Yeah, because school is definitely the best place to put kids to have lifelong friendships, and certainly not just make them hate each other and bully each other.
And basically what we need is campaigns, information campaigns from the government telling us basically what we already know.
Yeah.
If you want to be less lonely, you have to socialize with people. To socialize with people, you have to exit, let's say, your room. You have to basically contact other people, not just via a keyboard or a screen. You have to go out, meet people, make some friends. And I think that this is something that is not basically evident. Maybe we need studies.
No, you know what I reckon this is? I think this is a giant state money laundering scheme because of all the money they printed under the pandemic. But via MMT, they're trying to take it out of the money supply. So what do? You set up a government program to tell you the obvious and then spend millions of pounds on the careers of bureaucrats to end up at just go touch grass. That's what this is. It's a way to take money out of the glutted money supply to tell people to go have friends. Great. Thanks, Joe Biden.
Right.
Thanks, Chris Murphy.
Now, we have this article for you if you want to read more from the Washington Examiner. From right to left, government intrusion is never a good idea. If you want to check a bit more about it, just
have a read.
Have a read. Now, let's go on this bill here. Now, let's scroll a bit up and we'll go down there again. So, in the Senate of the United States, a bill to establish the Office of Social Connection Policy to establish a national strategy on social connection and for other purposes. Now, what I like here is the use of the word findings. It implies that, these things were found. We didn't know them already, but they found them.
There's the old Oren McIntyre phrase of, I'm going to butcher it, but every so often, a progressive reverse engineers normal sexual and social norms out of degeneracy and acts like they've rediscovered Atlantis. Why do we need a committee to have friends? Something's gone very wrong here.
Well, something has gone very wrong. The question is what that is and who caused it.
Yes.
And, okay, now let's go to the findings. Now, Congress finds the following. Number one, the health of the nation is rightly measured not only by its aggregate wealth or global power, but more centrally by its shared vision and the bonds of connection that knit its people into a community.
Right. And so you've spent the last how long sowing division between those communities by destroying faith, destroying patriotism, and instead stratifying people into intersectional identity groups. And you think people are going to feel at home with that rather than alienated and angry? Yeah, good job. Thanks.
Yeah, this is brilliant because it shows a complete hypocrisy, because I like the fact that they phrase it in terms of the nation.
Yes.
We need a strong social fabric for the nation. Yeah. The same people that constantly tell us that if you talk about the nation, you're far right. Or if you care about national identity, you're far right. If you like eating toast in the morning, you're far right.
Yeah, Democrats accidentally stumbled across Burke.
Yes, exactly. So the same people, they phrase it in terms of the nation. Now, finding number two. The fraying of the social fabric is directly implicated in the growth of loneliness, decline of civic and religious participation, the disintegration of communities, rising economic inequality and precarity, falling economic mobility, rising rates of depression, anxiety and addiction, diminishing health and life expectancy, and rising levels of polarization and radicalization.
Who caused all that? That'd be a great idea. Maybe it was packing people into cities, demonizing Christianity, demonizing white people, and elevating up minorities as impugned from criticism, causing inter-ethnic and intersexual tensions, printing loads of money and locking down the entire civilization for a couple of years, failing to build homes and causing mass migration to cause pressures on the housing market, over-medicating American teens with birth control, Ritalin, antidepressants, massive overprescription of opiates causing deaths from despair, and polarization and radicalization. Well, maybe hosting a giant bright red lit press conference where you call half the country the enemy of the people if you support Donald Trump, that might deepen polarization. Or am I just a conspiracy theorist for all of that?
Well, I think that's Arrow 404. They cannot answer because now you're phrasing it in terms of nation. they cannot give you a response that doesn't imply that if you care about your nation and its maintenance of its national identity, you're a bad person.
I'm surprised you haven't made a Terminator reference yet. These emotions do not compute.
Your confusion is not rational.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, but I like the fact that these are findings.
Yes.
They have to actually make studies that they have to find that, the fraying of the social fabric is directly implicated into the growth of loneliness.
Yeah, I have pondered my orb and come up with the obvious.
Okay. These changes affect all of the people of the United States, but fall with particular force on the poor and marginalized, on children and adolescents, on individuals residing in economically disadvantaged regions, on veterans and all the elderly, and individuals without a college degree. Now, if we go to page 8 here, now, we have a lot of suggestions of what this Office for Social Policy is going to do. And it says here, assist the president in providing general leadership and coordination of federal research and development programs relating to social connection and loneliness.
So a slush fund.
Yeah. So let's go here also. It needs to have one or more representative of LGBTQIA plus advocacy organizations.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And let's end with this.
More intersectional vanguardism. Yeah. Great.
Because these things cost. We should mention this. It says here, authorization of appropriations. There is authorized to be appropriated to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention $5 million for each of fiscal years 2024 through to 2029 to conduct or support research on loneliness and social connection.
So $25 million spaffed away on telling people to get friends.
25 or 30, depends how they count it. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, tomato. It's a lot. Total bankruptcy.
It's a lot. Now, let's see here. So Eugene McGarrell from Australia. He says, outside Australia, jurisdictions are beginning to realize the opportunity created from social connection policies. There is opportunity in social connection policies, the opportunity for people to socially connect. In the US, the Surgeon General's Advisory on the Nation's Loneliness Epidemic released a report on the healing effects of social connection and community.
So, do you know what this reminds me of, actually? Do you remember when Klaus Schwab came out and said we're going to have a very angry world?
Yeah.
This seems like preemptive damage control for people getting really discontented at the controlled demolition of every nation's prosperity and an actual organic sense of community. So this seems like an enterprise in institutional gaslighting.
And it's also a way of saying that, well, listen, we cared about social connection.
Yeah.
We did care. It's the other side that didn't.
Yes. Don't
tell that we didn't care because we have this office.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's look at some statistics here, because it has to do with this is a link from Science of People. It says US loneliness statistics 2023, are Americans lonely? It says loneliness is steadily rising in the United States, which has created a loneliness epidemic. 2018 loneliness statistics show that 30% of older adults report loneliness. Survey data from 2019 shows that 58% of Americans often felt like no one in their life knew them well. In 2020, young women in the US were most likely to report losing touch with friends. Most Americans are seeking more friendship and connectedness than ever. So, it has several statistics here. Let us see here on what age group is the most lonely. From baby boomers to millennials to Gen Z, young people, young adults, and older adults all report loneliness. A recent study surveyed 2,000 plus people across the US from 18 to 89 plus years old. Researchers could not find any age-related predictors of loneliness. They found that living alone, having poor health, infrequent social interactions, and being unmarried predict loneliness in all age groups.
So being alone predicts loneliness?
Yeah.
Thanks for wasting all that money on asking people.
So there were researchers that basically said living alone increases loneliness, is a predictor of loneliness, a good predictor of loneliness. Having poor health is a predictor of loneliness. Not interacting frequently with people is a predictor of loneliness. Being unmarried is a predictor of loneliness. Now, I want to give you a pass to talk a bit about the institution of marriage and loneliness.
Right.
Do you have What do you think here? It seems to me that there's a lot thinking going on here.
Okay, so weirdly enough, I think there has been a lot of cultural programming against marriage, particularly for men, of where there's the old joke of never want to have sex again, get married, or the husband's going to end up sleeping on the sofa, or you get separate bedrooms, and that's kind of a boomer mindset, particularly because the way we thought about marriage, particularly post-industrially, has changed, of where you're two separate rational actors that come together to complete each other, either as soulmates or there's a kind of transactional nature.
Let us maximize value.
Yeah, genuinely, that's the Randian way of thinking about it. Whereas before, you were two members of a subsistence household, and you nobly struggled together to make ends meet. And I mean, it might, given dire economic circumstances, look like we're going back to that. But literally, like anyone with any sense who doesn't outsource all of their rational capacities to experts and need a statistic or a study to back everything up, have intuition and a working brain, could have told you this. So this is why I think loads of the social sciences is just a slush fund. And that's why, and I'm sure Josh will be able to talk about this were he here. He's not dead, he's just in the office. The replicability crisis in the social sciences means that loads of studies just can't get repeated. That's why studies come out and refute them. Whereas this one, I mean, you're not going to have a problem replicating the findings of this one because it's just so bloody obvious you shouldn't have spent money doing it.
But some other things are not bloody obvious. Connor, everything is obvious to you, but not to every other person, apparently. Here's what researchers found that having in your life may protect against feelings of loneliness: a roommate, good health, a spouse, frequent social interactions.
So, friends, a wife, not being obese and dying means you might be slightly happier.
Yes.
I hate experts.
So that's the thing, that there are constantly, continuously money given to studies that prove the obvious. Now let's look at the next clip. I want to say that basically I think that this thing here is dangerous and
don't do it.
Don't do it. You don't need a study to find out that it's dangerous. Let's watch it. I checked the comments. They said that this person is alive. Yeah. But you don't need someone to tell you that this is dangerous. In the same way that you don't need people to tell you to pay money for studies that tell you, basically. Did I illustrate my point?
Point well made.
Point well made. Okay, you don't need people to get money from you and get taxpayers' money to tell you that, for instance, you can cure loneliness by frequent social interactions. Now, this is also another thing that you don't need studies to tell you that there's nothing to be taken out of it. Let's watch. Yeah. Okay.
That's going to get censored for YouTube.
Okay. But the point is,
don't do backflips if you can't do backflips.
Don't do backflips. Yeah, there's no thing. Now, but there's another point here to say, to be a bit more serious here, that it seems to me that one of the major problems nowadays is that everything becomes a bit more statist. Managerial. So there's a deep problem here because, for instance, we have people who are, there is an underlying mentality that says that basically all problems can be outsourced to the government. Mm-hmm. And what I want to say is that basically this cannot happen, and that this is a sort of hubris in managerialism, because there are some things that you just have to let people do themselves. Civil society is distinct from the government. We're not, I mean, last time I checked, we don't live in the USSR. There isn't a kind of continuity between civil society and the government.
Well, you haven't been paying attention, Stelios, unfortunately, because pretty much all of these things are socially engineered and top down. I know. I wish we weren't, but that is very much the state. But this is the interesting thing. If you flip it on its head, lots of the policies of the corporatists and the state in the last century, in many respects, have deliberately undermined and deliberately undermine communities and atomize us from each other. Everything from city planning to pharmaceutical regulations to social media regulations to deliberately funded state propaganda. And so we've ended up in a place where we are stratified, and the state is coming back in to manufacture consent to justify this dependency that it has induced in many populations who are, hoping on welfare and eventually universal basic income and the like. And like you said, now it looks like they can come back in and clean up their own mess and say, well, we're the good guys. We're giving you the solution to the problem that we created. It's very perverse, and that's why we're ridiculing the state for trying to fix their own issue. But there is a serious loneliness epidemic. Deaths from despair are massively high. The leading killer of men under 45 is still suicide, and that peaks particularly around when men are unemployed or get divorced, and they get dragged through the divorce courts, which is, again, rigged against their favor. So there are serious issues of alienation and social media addiction and a lack of relationships here. 27% of men 18 to 30 report never having an intimate partner. That's historically unprecedented. So my heart goes out to you, fellas, if that's you. But the government is not a solution to that, because they actively hate you and have a perverse incentive to foster you continuing being lonely, because if you do have a community, you're independent from them, and then they don't get paid.
And there are some things that there should just be left to society, civil society, because that's what they are. Okay? You don't force people into be friends. You don't force people to, to get married. It's not like, for instance...
Well, let's not go far.
It's not a child, you will learn to love him. Okay, well, whatever. Let's keep that for another time.
Yep.
But that there's a problem when we try to impose from the top down things that should spontaneously arise, things that arise from the bottom up. And I think that this is one of the things. But one interesting thing to say and finish with this segment is that one of the things that governments do is that they completely disintegrate communities. Because part of communities has to do with national sentiment. So, for instance, in Greece, we may say, it's a Greek community. We don't call ourselves like that. We call ourselves Greeks. But within communities, you could say it's the Cretan community. Okay, there's a strong sense of bonding in these communities that has to do with commonality of origin.
And it's tied to time and place. And this is part of the issue. And I'm going to say liberalism here, but you know what I'm talking about, of where if you think of people in universal abstract categories and they can be taken from one time and place and be as prosperous economic actors in any other time and place, then you eradicate the sense of time and place that built those communities in the first place. And so you need to top down engender communities to try and make people feel tied together despite being capable of being anywhere men. It's just a contradiction.
Exactly. And it shows us that, mass migration can disintegrate communities.
Yes.
And the same people that advocate for, completely open borders and for mass migration, it's a bit rich when they afterwards come and talk about, well, we care about the disintegration of community, and, well, let's outsource all your friendship to us, all your social connection. We're going to tell you what to do. And I think we should finish with a blast from the past that illustrates how communities are being, let's say, threatened and harmed by mass migration. And this is a blast from the past. You'll understand why. If we see it's from Chicago, where about the Black community that was reacting furiously against Biden's border policies. Now, if we could just check the clip, remind ourselves the clip.
All these resources that have not come to us, now you want to overly compensate for people who never lived here before, and we need to be taken care of first and foremost before anything else happens here.
Yeah. Why would any leader put our Black communities already riddled with crime at further risk by placing unvetted non-taxpayers steps away from our seniors, our children, and our homes we've worked so hard on our own to secure?
We are at war, people. Our communities are at war. They are violating our communities, and we asking that we across the country, we asking and we're demanding for office of Black America or whatever you want to call it to deal with issues like this.
That's right.
I did get placed on a wait list, but I was told that the immigrants was taking priority. See, that's a story that a lot of people don't know, and it hurt me. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I understand we need to be humanitarian, but these people my participants are third and fourth generation Chicagoan, born, bred, fed, and raised here. My grandmother, Mayweather Carrington, rest in peace, always said, Craig, charity starts at home first, and then it go abroad.
Politically, having over 500 people in our community would completely wipe out any interest we have.
Many of these migrants have been dumped in our neighborhoods without a plan in place to monitor and house them long term.
I'm not selling nothing. And I keep telling people, we don't have to move. If you sell, they gonna come in. If we don't sell, we gotta stand strong and
That's right. We're just getting started.
Well, apparently, communities that want to have a strong bond of sentiment that this bill says is integral for this part, they want to have, they react against mass migration. What do you make of this?
They feel entitled to be in a time and place and have customs which best suit them. So it seems the intersectional coalition is coming apart at the seams when personal interests are threatened. I will state, though, that, and I am confident in saying this, considering that woman had a feminist ribbon on her hat, these people will continue to vote Democrat because they'd like the migrants to be bussed in somewhere else. So it's the old tweet meme that's been going around of me sowing. Wow, this is awesome. This is so radical. Me reaping. No, wait, what? This sucks. Really? No, stop. Thank you for watching that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. If you enjoyed, why not visit our website where you can get the podcast live from 1 p.m. UK time every weekday, full, uncensored, and for free. And for as little as £5 a month, you can access our extensive library of premium content and help us keep the lights on, with series such as Brokenomics, hosted by Dan, where in the latest episode he discusses his dire predictions for our economic future. And if you'd like to see the rest of the content that Dan and the team are putting out, you can follow Dan on Twitter at @KingBingo_ and the rest of us over at @LotusEaters_com. Until next time, goodbye.